And unfortunately, when we look into the region, there are too many things going too many different directions in too many places. And we're going to have a conversation this morning. Our outlook is Sudan, but we can't run away from the import of the conversation and the happenings in Tanzania this morning. We're going to get into that, and joining us to be able to do that is Dr. Kenneth Ombongi, who is an Associate Dean, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, University of Nairobi, and he's here this morning. Good morning, Dr.
Morning, Lou, and the rest of your colleagues. Morning. It's a cool morning.
It is.
And it looks like it's warm in here because you are always spicing it up. Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. And we're never lost for stuff to spice it up with, I guess. Yeah. And this morning is not like, is like none other, because there's too many things going on. We look beyond the borders of Kenya, and many would say even still within the borders of Kenya, because whichever way you look at it, that Tanzania just to the, the southeast, and Sudan to the north, things are blowing up. Things have been blowing up in Sudan for a while, and now we see that hundreds of thousands of people having died, injured, fled. And also Tanzania, we are seeing that the numbers looking like 1,000, many say a lot more than 1,000 having died. And we want to look into both of these countries, as we'll continue to do. Let's start with Tanzania. They say that things that happen in present day are as a result of history. But before we do that, I'd like us to hear from Dennis, who's taking us to a different country this week.
We are in Mauritania now. It is a country whose about 2/3 is desert or semi-desert, which forms part of the Sahara. And the Senegal River forms the country's southern boundary, and it's the main source of water for farming. So when we talk about some of the things that pushes its economy, they mine iron ore, fishing and livestock, which then continues to push the country's economy. But the problem we get today, the camel does not see the crookedness of its own neck. How would you interpret that?
The camel does not
see the crookedness of its own neck.
The crookedness of its own neck. This is a wonderful one. It's very interesting that you have gone all the way like the city used to do to bring it forth. But we have an equivalent one in our own Swahili language here in Eastern Africa, which I'm sure you remember your high school days, Nyani Aoni Kundule. What that means, and the understanding there is that every so often we don't see the shortcomings within ourselves. It's very easy to see the weaknesses, the bad things, the issues that are affecting the other person, the other country, and many other places. So it is urging us that sometimes, lest we forget, we need also to look inside. The good book. The Bible says, before you talk about the speck in another person's eye, please remember there's a log in your own. And, Ndu talked about Tanzania as a beginning point. Perhaps this proverb, this saying, applies to them. For quite a while now, Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu has actually pointed fingers to Kenya as the trouble spot of Eastern Africa, basically saying that the sick man, so to speak, of Eastern Africa is actually Kenya, and seeing all trouble, all problems, all chaos in Kenya. And even something small happening in Tanzania, he attributes it to influence from these bad people, these bad boys and girls from Kenya, to use our word, wanatiririka kuja kwa nchi yetu. I think perhaps she concentrated so much on Kenyaphobia, and she forgot that they have their own problem. And we could very appropriately say nyani aoni kundule. Anaona ya mwenzake. That's actually the meaning of that proverb, using the figurative of a camel, because camels are common in those desert lands. And back here, we have more apes and the baboons and the monkeys. Yeah.
So if we look at the problem, and we can start with Tanzania, because, I mean, perhaps one would say that there's a lot more intricacy in the Sudan conflict, but in Tanzania, would it be a full power of us to say that it is as a result of this election, it is as a result of the Suluhu presidency that has gotten Tanzanians to the point whereby they are frustrated with the status quo, or has this been brewing pre-Suluhu?
I think what President Samia Suluhu has done is simply to add fuel into already burning fire, almost literally. You see, historically, Tanzania has been a one-party state for the last 60 years. There is a semblance of plural politics. But what has come in as opposition parties are actually fairly insignificant outfits, which do not make any meaning. So Tanzania has been under CCM, Chama cha Mapinduzi, since the days of Nyerere. Now, what has happened in subsequent years is that a number of leaders are built around the reputation of Mwalimu, and many of them literally learned from that legendary African leader, I think Mwalimu, of all the founding fathers of Africa, he was more of a philosopher than a politician, sharing, I think, those credentials with probably Seda Senghor of Senegal. And we read Nyerere even up to today. If you look at the men who succeeded him, they were very keen students of Nyerere, and they continued his legacy of creating, a nation out of a political entity that was, disintegrated by colonialism. Actually, in the region, Nyerere was the only one of the founding presidents of Eastern Africa who managed to create a semblance of a nation out of a colonial state. He did very well in that, and perhaps forgot that he also needed to fix the economics of the country. But since then, he gave Tanzanians what people in the region do not have. That is a feeling of being Tanzanian, a feeling of belonging, an identity that he galvanized around the African language Kiswahili. The Tanzanians, for all practical purposes, actually speak much better Swahili than Kenyans, than Ugandans, and even much far better than Congolese, for that matter. So, but if you look at in subsequent periods, from Mwinyi to Kikwete,
yep.
I mean from Mwinyi to Mukaba, and then Kikwete, Tanzania had increasingly become a very monolithic, political system, dominated by CCM. If I may use the Kenyan political language, CCM became Baba na Mama, like our KANU of yore. And they really, some of these leaders forgot that there are certain things, and change was increasingly becoming inevitable. Because of that presumption, in my view, they got into complacency. And gradually, particularly during the time of Magufuli, Starts with Kikwete, but Kikwete seems to have been more politically savvy and more discreet and more, laid back. But things came to the fore during Magavuli's time. Openly, autocratic, if you may want to put it that way, and many things that made Tanzania what it was, relations with the neighboring countries and all that. President Magufuli was fairly confrontational. And when Suluhu comes in, when Magufuli leaves the scene due to biology, presidents in Africa, they are changed either by the ballot or the barracks or biology. Magufuli biology took its course, and in comes Suluhu. Now, there are a number of dynamics, in my view, that happened that made the situation untenable for this great lady of Eastern Africa. In fact, a pioneer female president in this region. And we had a lot of expectations out of her. One is she couldn't quite hold the country together the way Magufuli used to do. Magufuli was autocratic, but a populist. He was very dictatorial, but spoke to the girl. He was he created this perception of being pro the small man and the small woman right in the villages, and it traversed that country from left, right, center, to the south, to the north, to the east, talking the language of the ordinary person. And thanks to him, he felt like finally the savior of Tanzania has arrived to protect us against foreign interests, to build our country, and all that. He talks about the rhetoric of getting rid of the West, but then again he impresses in some ways some Chinese influence, and talks the language of building the nation using our taxes. In comes this lady. She didn't have the language of Magufuli. She didn't play to the galley like Magufuli did, and it was bound to explode. So the implosion we are seeing is actually not of our own making. She only, as I said in the beginning of my conversation, literally added fuel into already burning fire. Things were changing in Tanzania. The young were increasingly feeling suffocated. But Magufuli did not give room for that to come out. When the weakness appeared in the name of Suluhu, and I'm not saying women are weak, but she didn't have the character, the powerful, forceful, overly autocratic character of Magufuli. By the time she realized that things were going in control, and she started to get in control, then she lost it.
But we still see, and whether it's conjecture or that it actually is the case, that we see forced disappearances under Samia Suluhu, whether they be journalists, whether they be priests, some people who just disappear and are actually killed. And that, yes, where she was focusing on the economy, external, whereby Magufuli went insular, she went external. But still, we see, claims of human rights abuses, forced disappearances of individuals, social justice progression that essentially had gone down the drain. It was, of course, we heard with Tundu Lissu and the likes that the degradation of social justice and things like electoral reform started to be called on during JPM's time, but then were exacerbated during Suluhu's. Is this what you're talking about, that all she did was pour fuel on the fire that was already burning? In
a sense, yes. What I simply mean is that the things had started going south during Magavuli's time. But due to the strong personality and very populist demeanor on the part of President Magufuli, we couldn't see this. Tanzania's political space was increasingly becoming narrow with Magufuli. Foreign journalists, I'm sure you know that better than I do, were a target. Regional, neighbors like Kenya and the rest faced the wrath of the president, and he could openly talk down to us. This is what the lady continued. But what Magufuli had that she didn't have is that strong control of situations and speaking to the ordinary people. That is where I think she lost it, but she was in fairly what I see as a sinking ship, if you want to use that characterization of the situation in Tanzania, which is, of course, a very clear indication to us that for far too long we had thought that it would not happen in Tanzania because of their demeanor. In Kenyan circles, we have even used Tanzania as a good example and Kenya as a bad example.
She's used Kenya as an example.
A bad one.
Yeah.
A bad one. But in Kenya, we use Tanzania as a good example. I remember our late Prime Minister one time giving an example of the Tanzania police who tell you, naomba nikushike. And then mnatembea na yeye kwenda kwa station. That is the Tanzania that we knew on the first third. But then internally, things were simmering. People were feeling the heat of the autocratic tendencies that were beginning to take root from actually Kikwete. I said Kikwete, President Kikwete was somehow a very smooth operator. A good student of Nyerere, but a very smooth operator, so to speak. But then this lady lost it because she could not have the firm control. And then when probably she was egged on to be firm and tough, it became too open to sustain. But all these cases that we have seen in our time started from Magavuli's time, control of the political space, very, very, very strong reaction to opposition leadership, hostility towards the neighboring countries, and looking more inside. He had that, capacity to keep the country going. Our problem was lacking those credentials, because I think part of the reason why Suluhu was chosen to be vice president is the reasons why vice presidents survive in Eastern Africa. You have to be meek and loyal and obedient, and malleable at the same time. Need to be used by the boss. And the strong Magufuli needed the weak Suluhu, to survive. But when tables turned, thanks to biology, then the missing Magufuli in the scene let the cat out of the basket.
Doc, even as we talk about Tanzania, you realize there is silence from neighboring countries. You talk about Kenya, the president has not spoken. You go to Uganda, East Africa is quiet. We know we've had congratulatory messages from African Union chairperson, but generally the African Union is silent. What message does that send?
Well, it's a very clear message. I think many leaders of the region are deliberately silent. Not necessarily to send a message to Suluhu, but to control things internally. Because there is a very high chance that what has happened in Tanzania is likely to happen. And I'm a historian, as I say always, we don't look forward, we look backwards. But then the further back you look, the further forward you see. That is Churchill, who said that, not me. Winston Churchill was once a wartime British Prime Minister, for our viewers who may not be historians like some of us. This is tactical on the part of the leaders of the region. You don't expect our president, to criticize or congratulate Suluhu when he himself is actually living in a glass house. So he can't throw stones. So he can't congratulate her because it will be like Kenyans are very clear that what Mama Suluhu is doing in Tanzania is not right. He is known to have deported Kenyans from Tanzania, the activists, who he said are causing trouble. They have caused enough trouble back in their home, and they are exporting it to Tanzania. For our president to congratulate her, it will mean that he will invite trouble for himself at home. So you better maintain tactical silence in those diplomatic circles. Then the other dimension to it is it's really a catch-22, because the world is saying things are going wrong in Tanzania. Look at the backlash that faced the chairman of the African Union Commission when he congratulated Madame Suluhu. People even did not read further. He issued a statement congratulating her first, and then he was very cautious by saying things are not right, and the warring parties in Tanzania need to come together and find a sustainable solution for their governance. Nobody saw that. They only saw congratulations. And you can see...
that was enough?
You can see the backlash. So no one wants to take the risk, whether it is our old Mzee Yoweri Kaguta Museveni or Salva Kiir, who is having his own challenges on the other side, or even Tshisekedi in DRC, even up here in Somalia. One thing we have failed to appreciate, and I tweeted about this, in countries that have 60% youth in our population who are jobless, restless, and educated, like in Kenya, we are sitting on a time bomb. So any slightest mistake will actually set us ablaze. So what we need to do, and the leaders of this region, is that they need to learn a lesson from Tanzania, to learn to listen to their young people. Because the capacity they have, and we have seen this not just from Africa, but also from elsewhere. You've seen what has gone on in Nepal, in South Asia. You've seen what's gone on in Madagascar, in Morocco, and elsewhere. Is that we need to learn to listen to the young people of this continent, to the young people of this world. It's actually not confined to Africa. You go to the UK, you go to the United States. The youth are restless. And they are saying, haki yetu. So our presidents are just being cautious because of internal issues more than actually international relations of the region. So tactical silence is a better option for foreign policy for now in the region.
For now. It may not work in the very soon future.
It may not work because, Tanzania's case has demonstrated that no country is completely insular to violence. And also no country is assured of perpetual peace. Because we never thought Tanzanians are capable of burning houses and throwing stones like the bad Kenyans.
Indeed.
But now we know that they are capable of doing that.
Indeed.
And from what we have learned in the political history of our own country, Kenya, once it starts, it never stops. You can take that to the bank. And it's 9 o'clock, banks have opened.
There you go, Doc. And even as we do that, even as we have this conversation, hundreds of thousands of Sudanese nationals are making their way into Kenya seeking refuge. This is because of the conflict. It's beyond a conflict now. In those circles, humanitarian law, we say now it is war that is happening in Sudan. People are dying. The numbers... we're looking at now, the numbers of people who were killed in the Rwandese genocide pale in comparison to what is happening in Sudan. Walk us through this.
The Sudanese situation, and we are really looking at what is essentially called the Republic of Sudan, as opposed to South Sudan. When I was here last, we were talking about South Sudan. And our Prime Minister had just been appointed by the President of Kenya to go and negotiate with his brothers, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. Let's go to Sudan. That's the Republic of Sudan, Khartoum, not Jubaland. Not Juba. And you can only understand the situation in Sudan, if you understand the history of that country. Sometimes I pity some people in some circles in the country who are tempted to think that the history is memorizing the names of people who have died and when they died, without knowing that even the wise Solomon of all Israel said there's nothing new under the sky. Everything is historical. Tell me what you have done in your own life, in the way you look and in what you do that is new. Nothing really. So when you look back, you begin to understand yourself. That's why the motto of our Department of History and Archaeology is know thy history, know thyself. That's our motto in the department where I work before I became dean, but I still teach my students. So back to Sudan, the roots of the crisis we are seeing are deep. Back to the colonial days in Sudan. And as historians, when we say this, people say, oh, you are blaming everything on the
colonialists.
No. The problem begins when the Egyptians and the British really subdue Sudan and create a joint venture, which we loosely call a condominium, in 1899. That rules Sudan up to 1956 and purportedly gives independence. The problem starts that the colonialists, the British were running the show. The Egyptians were brought in for basically cosmetic reasons and diplomatic reasons, because Sudan was to be controlled because of the British interests in Egypt. So they rule Sudan using the traditional British policy of divide and rule. And Sudan was divided racially, and also geographically, the south and the north. The north was predominantly, under Arab influence. They got the better part of the colonial goodies in terms of infrastructure, in terms of education, and the south was actually forgotten, literally, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of opening up the place to education, healthcare, and name it. By the time Sudan was, quote unquote, gaining independence, Sudan was a country of two nations under one state. The nations with different identities, mutual suspicion, and potential political power struggle. The North and the South. So those were two nations, but under one state.
Right.
And I guess we know the distinctions between the state and the nation, So with that, then problems begin. Just before they hand over the country to the locals, a year before, a civil war began. The history of the Anyanya is very well known. The civil war begins. It runs all the way until 1971. They agree on some way, and Sudan got a semblance of peace. That did not last. 1983, Garang and his team say enough is enough. We carry guns and go to the bush and fight. This goes on until we see the negotiations led by Kenya then in 2005, and Sudan gains independence in 2011. They successfully secede from North Sudan. The secession of South Sudan did not end the problems of what now could become the Republic of Sudan.
Okay.
Because the history of elite hostilities, the history of marginalized groups, they were not just the South. The Nuba, the people of the Nuba region, the Blue Nile region, the Darfur now that we are talking about, who are actually basically African communities, as opposed to the Arabized elites of Khartoum. They had their own historical grievances. So, secession did not solve the problem. But it created a chance for the Republic of Sudan now to settle their own scores among the elites. And that is where trouble begins. When trouble begins, what the government did under Omar al-Bashir is increasingly lose control of Sudan. And they decided to control it using militia groups. This has happened in many ungoverned spaces in Africa. What political elites do is that they co-opt militia groups to fight for them. That is how the Janjaweed actually came up under the current leader of RSF, that is the Rapid Support Force, Hemedit.
Yes.
That's how he emerges. Because he was kind of recruited, equipped, and financed by Khartoum to control the African communities in Darfur, to be under the control and suzerainty of the Khartoum government under al-Bashir. Now, al-Bashir did not hold on for long, until the increasingly militarized situation in Sudan gets rid of al-Bashir through a military coup and brings the scene the man now, General al-Burhani. Now, Ali Burhani went into what we can now see from his perspective, could be an unholy alliance with Hemedit. He changed, he rebaptized them, from the Janjaweed militia into a paramilitary unit. Now they are calling the Rapid Support Force. Al-Bashir was actually toppled. He leaves the scene. But when it came to a decision as to who is going to rule, the two couldn't agree. While they agreed that al-Bashir was a problem, they couldn't agree who among themselves who is going to rule. Then Hemedit becomes part of the transitional arrangement, and things went out of control in 2023 when the two groups started fighting.
And even when the two groups start fighting, the war continues to rage on, and something happens. Kenya finds itself in the amidst all that. We see RSF forces in Nairobi, and in the diplomatic circles, Kenya is seen to be harboring the Rapid Support Forces who are causing chaos in the country. And even later now, weapons are allegedly coming from Kenya is found in the hands of RSF. Just what kind of diplomatic tiff or bad place does Kenya find itself with regard to the ongoing war where hundreds of thousands of Sudanese are being killed?
We'll probably come to that in a bit because countries in the region have their own interests in Sudan. Whether you're talking about Kenya, you're talking about Uganda, you're talking about Ethiopia. Let me finish this narrative so that we tease out some arguments out of it. Then when they differ and then start war, the guns go into duty in 2023, that is when things go out of control because what looked like some kind of somehow subdued conflict confined to Khartoum starts to spread out, and now it is the struggle for power, territory, and control. Power, territory, and control. What you call in history PTC. When groups begin to fight for power. Begins to fight for control of territory, begins to fight for control. That is a perfect civil war when it happens within a country. The RSF starts now, demarcating what one could call spheres of influence around the country. And that is what has led them to cause the mayhem that is being witnessed in Darfur region, the Nuba Mountains, and the rest of the areas where they have come so heavily against very specific ethnic groups. The Masaliti group, the Sagawa group, and also now the Ful group. And that's where people are thinking that any philosophy that is targeted on a particular group, then it moves from a civil war where groups are struggling for PTC. You remember what I call PTC?
Yep.
Power, territory, and control, into a genocide. Where the target is to exterminate certain groups and get rid of them almost completely.
In order to gain power, territory, and control.
In order to gain power, territory. That is genocide. Now, come back to your question, Dennis. The awkward situation that Kenya finds itself in the region. You see, the militia groups fighting in Sudan, just like elsewhere in the continent, are kept in place by strong business interests. Hemedit is, mines, gold, and all these interests, partly to keep themselves going and to get their supplies in terms of weaponry that they use, and also to be rich. Militia groups don't fight necessarily to liberate, although some of them can run on the clarion call of liberating our people, liberating our country. But there are strong business interests. Actually, we call it the political economy of war, or what we loosely call markets of war. There are people benefiting. There are people profiteering in this war situation. And I have a suspicion, and this is conjecture now, that's where we find ourselves. There's a possibility that a few of us within the political establishment in the country are having commercial links with some of the top members of RSF. That is rumor on the corridors of politics, but I'm sure with time there will emerge some evidence. Now, Kenya finds itself in a very awkward situation in what we dealt with as probably militia groups pursuing economic interest, and a few of us benefiting in one way or the other, and then it has ruined Kenya's foreign policy in the region. In fact, in my view, that is even what undermined the influence of Kenya in being a legitimate peace broker that it has always been in the region.
Right.
And to some extent, our defeat in the chairmanship of African Union Commission on the hands of a small, tiny little country, with the deepest respect to Djibouti, is because of how we played our relations with some of these informal groups in Sudan. Ethiopia has its own interests. Uganda has its own interests. That's why, you remember last time, when the IGAD team said, let's be led by Kenya, the warring parties in Sudan said no. Kenya is not going to be an impartial...
Kenya is already biased.
Kenya is already biased. The same thing happened to us in Democratic Republic of Congo. I said that when I was here last time. And that has weighed heavily on the hegemony that we have previously exercised in the region, unless our foreign policy thinkers go back to the drawing board.
Even as we look at the geographical chess game that's happening here in terms of who's going to, come in or not, the numbers that we're looking at, the United Nations, we heard Antonio Guterres say the other day that this has to stop and that the world has to sit back and take notice. The way an entire UNGA, in September, and not just this September, but the previous one, sat and had conversations about what was happening between Israel and Palestine, Gaza, Hamas and Israel, had conversations whereby there was a special sitting of the General Assembly to discuss the war between Israel and Palestine. That what is happening in Sudan is markedly worse. There are 300,000 refugees leaving Sudan, interestingly enough, making their way in through and to Kenya, and that the people are dying. And we also know that in these circles, the business of war is not cheap. Somebody is benefiting from the arms that are being used to kill. somebody is benefiting by keeping boots on the ground for this to happen. It happened in Darfur when we see a previous conflict that happened whereby there was some sort of semblance of a peace treaty then having been upheld. But the world is essentially watching where another genocide is happening on the African continent, and we don't seem to be too bothered about this.
You know, and I've always thought you are a good student of history. If you look back, this is Africa. It is happening in Africa. And if you take a glance to history, you will realize that over the years, Africa is treated differently. The same United Nations stood and watched Rwanda genocide take place, and Rwanda ban. There are so many cases. They sat back and watched the DRC literally break up into pieces. Look at the token efforts that we see in Somalia over the years. So this is Africa. Globally, Africa is treated differently, and that's what history has told us. And that pattern is not likely to change sooner. Part of the reason is that yes, we have the natural resources. We are a rich continent that is poor. That's true. But we have no political voice in the global political dynamics. We have no political voice in the global political dynamics. And that is the greatest curse of this continent. A small incident in the Middle East between, the Palestinians and the Israelis, if it happened and, a few fatalities happen, it will gain international prominence. The United Nations will stop and listen. Reason is, the strong, very strong influence of Israelis around the globe, including creating what governs in London and Washington and in many other places around the world makes a difference. The point is that the global South, Africa particularly, is actually a second-rate kind of region when it comes to the operations of the international system. And I don't foresee anything better coming out of that. Last time, look at the events under President al-Bashir in Darfur. The only thing we saw is just a token indictment by the EACC, which goes on forever. So I'm not overly surprised with the attitude of different powers, whether it is the European Union, they issue statements and warnings, but that's where it ends. But the idea of putting money where their mouth is will be persistently absent, just like it has been persistently absent historically. Yes.
So do you think, with all this, you almost get a sense of defeat when you're looking at what's happening in the region?
Yes.
So this conflict has been ongoing for some time now.
Yeah.
There have been attempts, at least, to have a ceasefire. They have all failed. The US, like you're saying, apart from just condemning the violence and the killings and everything,
and also saying genocide is going on.
Yes. So they will say these things. They will want the citizens not to go to those particular countries. So there was the US, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and now the African Union are all trying to have a meeting. And often it has failed because the aggrieved parties don't show up. So we saw the African Union reawaken that bid by then turning to Uganda President Yoweri Museveni to come in and help in this situation. We don't know how that's going to pan out. But if you look at negotiating by the process by bringing these leaders together, we've seen in other parts it has failed. In South Sudan, we saw Riek Machar and Salva Kiir being brought together. Those efforts they look like they were working, but then they keep failing. Is there an end to this conflict? Will there be a ceasefire? Because there are people dying every day. And now we're getting an influx of refugees coming into Kenya. A lot are going to Ethiopia and other parts. Last week we were reporting 300,000. That figure could be higher. Is there hope? Is there going to be a ceasefire?
Okari, you see, the obvious answer to your question is what has a beginning will almost naturally have an end. But when you are dealing with an African situation, which is overly African, and I'm using the word in italics, if you say overly African, the world will drag its feet. Look at how many attempts President Trump made to make sure that there is a stop to the carnage that was going on in the Middle East. Look at the amount of force, diplomatically, that was applied to at least get a semblance of some kind of understanding between the people of Gaza and Israel.
Even Russia and Ukraine.
Even look at what they are doing with Russia and Ukraine and all that. So the African situation is going to take quite a while to sort out. What has happened is actually this binary of starts and ends. They start something, it ends before it gives anything meaningful. The Jeddah kind of negotiations that was brokered by the United States and Saudi Arabia did not yield much other than strong statements. So for me, if I may allow the latitude to look forward, it has come to a point where perhaps the African Union needs to rethink its role. But then it becomes very difficult that every time they make an attempt to rethink their role, they cannot even fund it. Look at the situation in Somalia, that it's led by African Union, but the funds are coming from where?
The Americas and Western Europe.
From Washington and Brussels. You see that? That is the head of the EU. In Brussels. So it is one of those things that one could, for now, describe as a catch-22 for the African countries. Unless then we face the issues that are facing Sudan today, the power struggle between the two characters, the two personalities, Ali Burani and his followers, and Ahmedid and his followers, and they begin to see sense that you don't have to exterminate communities because of issues of identity, issues of belonging, and also issues of marginalization. I said a moment ago that African leaders need to learn how to listen to their citizens much better than we have done historically. And I don't know why listening, which is a very simple act, beats all the African political leaders.
It's interesting because it seems to be a problem across board, isn't it?
Yes, and we have failed to move away. When you look at the recent political history of many countries in Africa, is that every time we are at a twilight of a strong man, either the country tries to make attempts for renewal or implodes. That binary of renewal and implosion. In much more recent, if you look at way back, it started with Mobutu Sese Seko. Which year was that? And then Kenya, we had some semblance of transition after Moi, but Moi left us with a fractured country, tension packed, that culminated in the 2007, 2008 post-election violence. It goes to Mubarak in Egypt. You know what happened. It goes to Mugabe. And I don't know why these leaders are all their surnames beginning with M.
There's something there.
And then, of course, Gaddafi is another example. And now al-Bashir. That Sudan is not able to survive the exit of al-Bashir. And that has been a characteristic of African politics, actually, for the last 3 decades, if you look at it. If the examples I gave is anything to go by. Yeah. So we then need to learn. That's a lesson I want to draw from this, that democracy may be the worst of governments, as one great thinker described it, but it has no alternative. So if it is evil, then it's a necessary evil, because it has this dimension that forces you to listen and listen carefully to the people and do something according to the will of the people. As Matiba used to say, let the people decide.
From the beginning of the show today until this point, I think that's the one thing that has come through. Listen to the people. What are people saying? Listen to them. And that is what ends this Situation Room this Monday, the 3rd of November. Dr. Kenneth Ombongi has been here with us this morning. We've been looking into Tanzania and Sudan, Associate Dean of Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Nairobi. Thank you for being here with us this morning.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here in the mornings and spicy together with you guys.
Asante, and thank you for starting off November with us in the Situation Room. More conversations continue. Enjoy the rest of you listening. Thank you so much. It's 3 minutes past 10. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.